Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast, where I seek truth in the world's great books. I'm your host, Eric Rostad, coming to you from the beautiful Books of Titans studio in Franklin, Tennessee. My goal is to read 200 of the great books over the next 10 years and share what I'm learning. I'll talk a bit about each book, tie ideas together from a variety of genres, and share the one thing I always hope to remember from each of the great books. Today I'm going to cover Hippolytus, a play by Euripides. This is from book 34 from my 2024 reading list, and Euripides is selection 15 from my great books reading list. Well, this story here, Hippolytus, is a story of a battle amongst the goddesses, and it's fought through the lives of human beings. The goddesses are Aphrodite, the goddess of love and desire, and she is contrasted and fights against the goddess Artemis, the goddess of chastity. Well, with each of these tragedies, the two things that we always want to start out with is asking who is the chorus, who makes up the chorus, and then who speaks first in the tragedy play. And so the chorus in this one is made up of the women of Trozen, and that's where this particular tragedy takes place. It's in the northeast corner of the Peloponnese, and the first speaker in this tragedy is Aphrodite, the goddess Aphrodite. So in this episode, I'm going to do it a little different, and I'm just going to walk through the play, just walk through it and read parts, read sections, talk about them, kind of get into the story, get into some of the quotes and the ideas and themes as I just take us straight through the tragedy. And then I'll close out with a question at the very end. And I just want to say at the very beginning, I love this tragedy play, and so did the Greeks, because it won first prize in the contest in 428 BC. So these tragedy writers, they would perform a set of 3 tragedies, and then they would have a satyr play at the end, more of a comic play that would close out the 3 tragedies. So you'd have 4 in total, and then these would be ranked. And so you'd have like Sophocles against Euripides, you'd have Aeschylus against these tragedy writers. And so the 3 greats were alive at the same time. And I can't imagine being at one of these things and seeing some of these performed for the first time ever, seeing them in person. But then, this one that I'm discussing today was part of a set that won first prize in 428 BC. So just really cool stuff. So let's get right into it. And let's start with this first entry point where we hear from Aphrodite, and she gives a great introduction into what is happening here. So I'm going to read sections of this intro. And it starts with this: powerful among mortals, glorious among the gods, I am named in earth and heaven the Cyprian Aphrodite. From east to west, from the Euxine to the Atlantic gates, over all that see the light of my sun, my rule extends. To those who reverence my power, I show favor, and throw to the earth those I find arrogant and proud. I'll stop reading there and comment on this part. So here's Aphrodite. She's introducing herself, and it's a great introduction because as I've seen in other Greek literature so far, Aphrodite is known as the god that is almost greater than the other gods in the sense that she can influence all of the gods. All the gods are subject to her except for a few, and those are the chaste gods like Athena and Artemis, who we're about to meet here in just a little bit. So everyone is under her spell except for just a very few, whether they are gods or humans. And you see this throughout Greek literature. No one can overcome the incredible power of love, and it just overtakes people, and so that's what we see here right at the beginning, and there's this kind of warning embedded in there: to those who reverence my power I show favor, and throw to the earth those I find arrogant and proud. And that's just a very interesting statement, at least or especially since what happens in this particular play, in this idea of being thrown to the earth. To those I find arrogant and proud. A few lines down, she continues with this: Hippolytus, the son whom the Amazon bore to Theseus, who was trained from childhood by Pythias the Severe, this youth, alone among the citizens of Trozen, calls me the most pernicious of the heavenly powers. He abhors the bed of love. Marriage he renounces. Honors instead Apollo's sister, the daughter of Zeus, Artemis, thinks her greatest of all the divinities. All day with her, the virgin, he ranges the green woods, with his swift hounds emptying the wide earth of beasts. Too fond of company, too high for mortal men. I do not envy them their sport. I have little cause, but for his insults, his contempt of me. I shall punish Hippolytus this very day. My plans, begun already, need but little to perfect. And I'll stop reading there. So here is what we have on. We're introduced to Hippolytus, who was the son of an Amazon woman. And that Amazon woman was named Hippolyta. And she bore Hippolytus with Theseus. So Theseus is the father of Hippolytus. And so, but Hippolytus, or Theseus is not married to Hippolyta. And so Theseus now has a new wife, Phaedra. And so we're introduced to her here very soon. And this is the next section. But what we also, before I read that, what we also learn about Hippolytus here is that he abhors the bed of love. He does not like Aphrodite. He is on the side of Artemis. And so what we know of Artemis is she is the goddess of chastity, but she's also the goddess of hunting. And so there's this great picture here of Hippolytus being in the woods with Artemis, and they're hunting together, and they're hunting game, and that's what he likes to do. He likes to be out hunting. He likes to be in the woods. He is a chaste man, but he does not like the Aphrodite. He likes Artemis. So continuing on here, we learn about his stepmother, Phaedra. And there Phaedra, his father's royal wife, saw him, and a terrible love, by my contrivance, gripped her heart. This was before she came with Theseus to Trozen. So what we learn here is that Phaedra, who is now married to Theseus, who is Hippolytus's father, his father's wife now is Phaedra. And Phaedra has seen Hippolytus on a previous trip to Athens, and she fell in terrible love with him. And as Aphrodite states here, it was by her contrivance, gripped her heart. So Aphrodite sets this in motion, that the woman who is the stepmother of Hippolytus, she falls madly in love with her stepson. And so this is obviously forbidden love, and this is what sets up this entire play. So continuing on here, again, this is still Aphrodite speaking in this opening monologue. From Athens here to Trozen, so she now, poor wretch, groaning and driven mad by the fierce goads of love, is dying, and in silence. None of the household knows what troubles her. But this love shall not end like that. I'll stop reading there. So now what we've learned is that Phaedra is so deeply in love with her stepson that she is sick. She looks sick. She is sick. But she cannot tell anyone what is going on, just for fear of what they would say. A few pages later, we find out a little bit more of just how much Hippolytus despises Aphrodite when he says this: I have no liking for a god worshipped at night. Later on, the nurse, who plays a large role in this tragedy play, she knows something is up. She witnesses Phaedra here, and Phaedra is sick. The nurse is concerned, and we find out that so the nurse keeps asking Phaedra, what's going on? What's happened here? And Phaedra finally just lets it loose, lets out what is going on, and that she is in love with Hippolytus. And here is the nurse's response. She does not take the news well. No, let me fall. Leave me alone. I want to die and be at peace. I'm dying. My life is over. What does it mean? A good, pure-hearted woman lusting after sin against her own will. Aphrodite is no god. She is something different, something greater. She it is who has brought the queen and me and this whole house to ruin. End quote. So the nurse just falls falls to the ground, collapses to the ground. My life is over. What does it mean? A good, pure-hearted woman lusting after sin against her own will, Aphrodite is no god. So what we see here is this idea that Aphrodite can overcome anything, and even against the person's will, against Phaedra's will, she is in love with her stepson. And we see this in Homer as well. I think back to the part where Priam is speaking to Helen, and Priam blames Aphrodite for everything that has happened between his son Paris and Helen, and all that has caused this Trojan War. He blames Aphrodite. He doesn't blame Helen or Paris. And so even in that, you get these early glimpses of just the overwhelming power of Aphrodite. So from there, we see Phaedra responding, she says this: "Next, I prepared to endure this madness as I ought, by mastering it with self-control. But finally, when I could not subdue the goddess by these means, I knew, and beyond contradiction, that for me, the best of all decisions was to end my life." End quote. So now Phaedra is saying, I know I was overcome by this lust, this desire for Hippolytus, this desire for my stepson. And I tried to subdue it. I tried to stop it with self-control and with means that I knew, but it didn't work. And now the only thing, the best decision, is to end my life. And so now she's contemplating suicide. She is so overcome by these feelings, but these feelings, what is in her mind, what is in her heart, they will cause ruin. And so far she has not acted upon these. She has shared this love. She's shared this desire with the nurse, in confidence, but now she knows that she will be dishonored if she acts out in this manner. So the nurse, after being struck at first of just how awful this was, she reconsiders, and she says this: often in human life, our second thoughts are wiser. And, Daniel Kahneman and her would have some things to talk about. And then right after that, she tells this to Phaedra. So again, this is the nurse, who is the only person who knows at this point, the nurse speaking to Phaedra. "The strong fever of Aphrodite has struck at you. You're in love. Is that surprising? So are many others. Are you to lose your life then because love has come? There's surely a grim prospect for all lovers now, and in the future, if their duty is to die. When love sweeps on you in her full power to resist is perilous. She steals gently on those who yield to her." And I'll stop reading there. So the nurse is shifting, and the nurse is kind of on the side of the argument that Phaedra made, that my solution now is to end my life. That's not what the nurse wants, but the nurse is kind of only giving another option, and that's to give over to this fever that has struck her. You're in love. Surely, when love sweeps in full power to resist is perilous. So she's kind of setting the stage for maybe there's a different, maybe you don't have to kill yourself. Maybe what if you just go into this love? What if you stop resisting? And so that's the first set. And then on the very next page, the nurse continues and she says this: "Be bold and love. This is God's will." So now this is an even stronger emphasis here of move forward and go after this love. The nurse continues on the next page: "Better to do the thing you want to do and save your life than die for the vain boast of chastity." So here the nurse is almost becoming the mouthpiece of Aphrodite, and is completely against Artemis at this point. Better to do the things you want to do and save your life than die for the vain boast of chastity. So the nurse here also kind of thinks that the choices are few, and either suicide or giving in, doing the thing you want and saving your life. And then, what's chastity have to do? What's the honor that you're trying to protect here? Just give in, just do it. And so that's where the nurse leaves us there. But then the nurse does something surprising, and the nurse tells Hippolytus of what Phaedra has told him. And the nurse ends and Phaedra finds out, and she says this: she has told him the whole fatal truth. She spoke in love, meaning to heal my suffering, but it was a crime. So this has not gone well. Now Hippolytus knows. He is very upset. He's yelling, and the nurse says this, and the nurse begs Hippolytus. She says this: "Forgive, son. We are human. We do wrong by nature." And this is an interesting thing to ask. It's something that will come up later in this play as well. But we have here, almost right in the middle, a request to forgive, and he doesn't forgive. And a few pages later, Phaedra hangs herself. And here is the line. This is the chorus singing this. "So it was that, with a fearful sickness of unholy passion, Aphrodite shattered her heart. Now foundering under cruel mischance, she will fasten a hanging noose to the beams of her bridal chamber, fitting it around her pale throat. Crushed with shame at her hateful destiny, she will choose instead the glory of good repute, and rid her heart of its anguished longing." End quote. Just a devastating section there, and she goes through with it. Phaedra hangs herself to rid her heart of its anguished longing, and choosing instead the glory of good repute. So you see even there, even after the nurse has implored her to just give in, to not worry about the vain boast of chastity, Phaedra can't do that, and she takes her own life as a result. Now we get to a scene where Theseus, the husband of Phaedra, has been gone this whole time. He just returns, and he comes upon this scene. His wife is dead, and here is some of the most devastating language that I've come across in these tragedies. So this is Theseus about Phaedra, his wife. "Oh, the misery of the world! Here I have suffered the heaviest of all my sorrows. O chance, how cruelly you have assaulted me and my house, sent as a nameless taint from some malign power. Worse, an annihilation of life and the love of life. I strain despairing eyes over my sea of misery. Hope vanishes. The shore is out of sight. Disaster is a wave that I cannot surmount. What piteous word can I speak, dear wife? What fated cruelty can I accuse? As a bird from my hand you have vanished, swooped swift and daring into the pit of darkness, and left me tears for your death and anguish for your despair. From some distant age, from sin committed in time long past, I reap this harvest which the gods have sent." And gosh, that is so devastating. At this point, he does not know the story. He does not know why she hung herself. She does not know. He does not know anything about what happened. But as he's seeing his wife and seeing the body, he notices that on her body there is a letter. And so he picks up the letter and reads it. It's a message. And in the message, it says that Hippolytus had tried to rape her. So Phaedra lies in this letter, but gives the impression that Hippolytus had tried to rape her. And so you've got the stepmother who has this deep desire for her stepson. The stepson does not return that love in any sense. He is against it. He condemns it, and she kills herself. But then in this letter that she knows Theseus will see, she blames Hippolytus. So again, Theseus is the father of Hippolytus, and so he is quite upset with this, and he curses his son. As part of all of this, of what's going on, there's just some incredible language of things said, and I want to read these really quickly here. So this one is Theseus. There should be somewhere a touchstone of human hearts, which men could trust to sift the thoughts of friends and show which one is a true friend and which is treacherous. Each man should have two voices, the one an honest voice, the other natural, so that his lying voice might be refuted by the true, and we should not be duped." End quote. This comes up a lot in these tragedies, and it's just this constant wish that there was some sort of a sign that you could tell the good from the bad. You could tell the truth from a lie. You could tell a good person compared to a bad person, or someone with good intent toward you versus someone with bad intent for you. There's this wish that there was some sort of a marker on the person that would make it easy to tell, and there never is. And that's what leads to a lot of these tragedies and the stories of what happens. But I loved coming across this one. Just, there should be somewhere a touchstone of human hearts which men could trust to sift the thoughts of friends and show which one is a true friend and which one is treacherous. Theseus continues on the next page. "The heart of man, is there no crime it will not dare? Can no limit be set to brazen wickedness? If in one lifetime it will swell in bulk so huge, if each new age deploys worse villainy than the last, the gods will need to create a second earth to house such vicious, corrupt natures as this world rejects." Whew, so good. Later on, we get to a comment, a large section here, Hippolytus speaking. I'm going to read right at the end here. "Phaedra preserved chastity, not possessing the virtue of chastity. I possess it and have practiced it to my own hurt." So here he makes a distinction between Phaedra, his stepmother, and himself. And he says Phaedra preserved chastity. So on the outward side of things, she never attempted to take that love to its conclusion of the lust with her stepson. So he says that Phaedra preserved chastity in that respect, but not possessing the virtue of chastity. So the virtue of chastity was not in her mind, but the virtue of chastity she did not have in her mind, but she preserved chastity. And he contrasts that with himself, where he says, "I possess the virtue of chastity and have practiced it to my own hurt." So I just love that contrast there. In Phaedra preserved chastity, not possessing the virtue of chastity, and Hippolytus says he had both of those things. So now, with Theseus cursing his son, there are things set in motion. There's these oaths that both the nurse and Hippolytus have taken, to where they cannot tell Theseus what has actually happened. And so Theseus has cursed his son, and there's going to be something that results from this. We get this line: "The wheel has turned, disaster follows on disaster. Fate is irresistible, and there is no escape." If that is not a great overview of tragedy in just a couple lines, I don't know what is. The wheel has turned, disaster follows on disaster. Fate is irresistible, and there is no escape. Next page here, the chorus is speaking about Aphrodite. This is a very famous collection here. I want to read this. It's about Aphrodite. It's about love. It's just a beautiful section here. So again, this is the chorus of Trojan women. "You, Aphrodite, lead captive the stubborn hearts of gods and of mortals. At your side, bright-winged Eros, with flashing flight, encircles them. Love hovers over the earth and over the salt sea's clear song. When on the maddened spirit he swoops with sweet enchantment, whelps of the mountain know the power of his golden wing, fish and all beasts that draw life from the earth's breast, warmth from the sun's eye, yes, and the hearts of men yield to the universal spell. Aphrodite, you alone reign in power and honor, queen of all creation." End quote. "In the hearts of men yield to the universal spell." So we've got the universal spell of Aphrodite in that second line there, this lead captive the stubborn hearts of gods and of mortals. Back to what I said at the beginning, where Aphrodite is just known to, it's a universal spell of Aphrodite. It impacts both gods and mortals. Artemis then speaks next, and she discloses to Theseus what actually happened. And she said this: "I came here for this purpose, to disclose your son's uprightness of heart, that he may die with a good name, and to reveal your wife's wild passion." Let me stop for a second. I forgot to mention what happened. At this point, because of that curse, Hippolytus gets on a chariot of horses, a chariot pulled by horses that he has groomed his whole life. These are his horses. But as part of this curse, Poseidon in the sea is seeking to harm Hippolytus, and so this huge wave comes up and knocks the chariot over, and Hippolytus's feet get stuck in the reins, and his head hits a stone, and then he is dragged by his beloved horses. He's dragged, and so his body's just all torn up, and so he's still alive, but he is dying. He doesn't have long to live, but this gives some storyline here for him to have some final words. So that's where we start here, where he is dying, and so Artemis is telling his father, "I came here for this purpose, to disclose your son's uprightness of heart, that he may die with a good name, and to reveal your wife's wild passion, or in some sense her nobleness. For Phaedra, plagued and goaded by that goddess whom I, and all who prize virginity, most hate, Phaedra desired your son. Her reason struggled to subdue passion. Schemes plotted against her led to her death. Her nurse informed Hippolytus of her affliction under oath of secrecy. He honorably resisted her persuasions, even when you so wronged him. Still, for reverence of the gods, he would not then revoke his oath. But she, dreading exposure, wrote that lying letter and destroyed your son with a false tale which you, Theseus, believed." End quote. As you can imagine, Theseus does not take this well. He's just distraught at what is happening to what has happened to his son. Artemis then says this: "Your sin is great, yet even for this you may yet find pardon. For Aphrodite willed all this to happen to appease her anger, and this law holds among gods." End quote. So we see, and as we've seen throughout this tragedy play, Aphrodite has willed this. This has all happened at the will of Aphrodite. As Hippolytus is dying, he makes a speech, and then this is one of the things he says: "The hellish heritage of blood guiltiness, won by forgotten ancestors, impatient bursts its bounds and descends on me. Why? I'm guilty of no wrong. Oh, endless misery, what shall I say? How can I free my life from suffering and forget pain?" I wanted to read that one because this is something that also shows up in so many of the tragedy plays. Just this idea that in the tragedies, oftentimes it's the innocent who suffer. And here you see this again: "I'm guilty of no wrong. Oh, endless misery." So at the very end, you've got Hippolytus dying. He has very little time left, and Theseus coming upon Hippolytus. And you just imagine the scene: this father who has caused his son's death due to incorrect information and cursing his son based on a lie, based on not having the full story, and just kind of rashly seeking revenge. And here he's down by his son. His son is dying. And Theseus begs, "Will you leave me guilty with unholy hands?" And Hippolytus responds, "No, you are free. I here absolve you of my death." Theseus responds, "I am free? You just discharge me of blood guiltiness?" Hippolytus says, "I swear it by the conquering bow of Artemis." And Theseus says, "Oh, dearest son, how noble a heart you show your father." And that's how this one ends. There is a pardon. There is absolution for what the father did to the son. And you contrast that earlier where the stepmother asks for forgiveness, or the nurse asks on behalf of Phaedra for forgiveness, and Hippolytus does not give it. But here at the end, there is this pardon. There's this absolution. And so that's one of the big themes in this entire tragedy play of revenge versus pardon. You have desire versus chastity, but it's deeper than that too. It's this contrast and theme of acting out desire versus desire being something that's in the mind. And should you work out that desire or act out that desire? And there's the temptation to do it for Phaedra. Her nurse is telling her to do it. She doesn't do it. She commits suicide instead. So it just, so many twists and turns in this one. And what's just incredible, I didn't read the whole opening monologue by Aphrodite, but Aphrodite in that opening tells exactly what is going to happen, who's going to die, how they're going to die. I mean, the whole thing is laid out right there, and you know what's going to happen, and it still just is devastating when it happens. It still kind of comes as a surprise almost, and it's just incredible. These tragedy plays are so good. So the question I come away with after this one is Hippolytus great? Is he great? He's almost annoyingly pure and chaste in a non-honorable way in a lot of this play, and it was interesting. At first, I liked him. I thought he was honorable. I thought he had a lot going for him, in that he was doing the right things for the right reasons, that kind of thing. But as you see this cruel side of him as well, and it just kind of begs that question. He's not this 100% likable person. There are things that are non-honorable about him. And so is he great? I mean, this play could have been titled Phaedra. It could have been titled Aphrodite, but it's titled Hippolytus. So what does Euripides want us to see? What questions does he want us to ask at the end of this? This one was written in 438 BC. The version I read is the Penguin Classics. It contains Alcestis, Hippolytus, Iphigenia in Taurus, and the translation is done by Philip Vellacott. I read a few different. One of the other books of Euripides I had was done by that translator as well, and I really liked his introductions as well as his translations. I do want to close out with the one thing, and I've got a couple things in this one, but I like to think about one thing from every book or tragedy play or whatever that I read, because I find that it helps me to remember those things. And the kind of two things that I remember from this one is just that idea of pardon. And it's a rare thing when it shows up. I mean, the scene between Priam and Achilles is so incredible just for the humanity of it at the end of the Iliad, after just vicious battles the whole time. But here you've got this pardon. And Hippolytus, he does not pardon his stepmother, but he does pardon his father. It's just this beautiful scene at the end of just horrible tragedy. But even with that, even with that pardon, the father lives and the son dies, and the father has to live the rest of his life knowing that what he did, knowing that he is responsible for his son's death, knowing that his wife lied to him in this letter, his wife committed suicide. Like, things are not going to be easy for Theseus going forward. But you did have that pardon, and that was just some little bit of light in this epic tragedy. The other thing that really stuck out is the role of gods, and you see this just overwhelming power of Aphrodite, and that just sets everything in motion in this play. And yet there is a tremendous role of humans here as well. There's a tremendous role of persuasion. The nurse is attempting persuasion. The nurse shifts course. That there's so many different things that humans do in this play amidst this battle in contrast of Aphrodite and Artemis. So you've got a little bit of both happening here. It's not just this straight up Aphrodite slays people and they just do whatever she says and everyone's conquered by love and that's the end of it and just have happen what may because of that. It's not the case at all. And so there's this balance, there's this working together of the role of the gods and the role of the humans. I just thought that was interesting and really fun to watch within this tragedy play. I want to let you, or just remind you that I'm on Substack now. So that's where this podcast originates. And so you can go to booksoftitans.com and you can comment on this episode. You can also, if you get value out of these episodes, you can return that value. So I've got options for $5 a month, $99 per year, or $500 per year. I have 13 people supporting financially this podcast, and I am so grateful to you guys. Thank you for that. And that just helps pay a lot of the different fees that come with this. I'm currently reading the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides. I am part of a Catherine Project group. We just had a meeting today to discuss book 3. I'm having trouble with that book. There's just so much going on. There's so many details, so many things to try to remember. But it's interesting even returning to these tragedy plays and just even realizing that the Peloponnesian War is occurring as this tragedy play is being performed in Athens. And Athens is one of the main players in this Peloponnesian War. And just to think about that, like that this almost world war or very broad area war for that time is occurring. Athens is part of that. And yet they're still doing these tragedy plays. But then also just to look and see, are these tragedy plays addressing what is happening in Athens or around Athens or in this Peloponnesian War? Just really fascinating. Sophocles was a general in part of these battles. So even the tragedy writers were involved in different ways. So just really interesting. I love how all this stuff ties together, even amidst retelling of things that happened. You've got connections to the tragedy plays and that sort of thing. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening. I would love to hear from you, especially if you have read Hippolytus, if you have some things you'd like to share. I'm here to learn. I'm here to discuss these things. That's one of the reasons I started this project. So I really would love to hear from you. If you have a general comment that would benefit others, please leave a comment in Substack on this podcast episode, because then other people can comment. They can read your comment, and that just helps everybody learn about this play. If you have something that you would just like to address with me, you can email me at Erik, E-R-I-K, @booksoftitans.com. You can follow Books of Titans on Instagram or Twitter, just at Books of Titans. And then I have another website, books.booksoftitans.com, where I share all of my reading lists back to 2017. I have my great books reading list there as well. I'll be back next week with another podcast episode. And until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep listening. I'm out.